Welcome to the Afro Storybook, collective wisdom and revelations from Africa and her diaspora. This is part 3, people, relationships, family, and community. Hello, I'm your host, Alexandra loves Irowiosa. If you're new to this offering, this is part 3 of 7. I interviewed 9 people from Africa and her diaspora all over the world and asked them the same questions about subjects like identity, roots, food, challenges, hopes, spirituality. My intention is that the stories these speakers share help you feel inspired and connected. If you haven't tuned into episode 1 to hear more about how this project came about, I suggest going back and listening to that episode first, and enjoy. When we started talking about these subjects, people, relationships, family, community for this part 3, I found that most of my guests talked about their immediate family and their extended family. Many of my guests spoke fondly about a special uncle or grandmother who kept them rooted and supported during their lives. And almost all of my guests are part of communities that have purpose in making the world a better place in some way. My dream is all of us living together in communities where we can easily say hello without scheduling it and chat with each other about the big stuff and the small stuff every day, where kids can run around safely in neighborhoods until the sun goes down, and maybe a place where watching the rain and feeling the wind with my best friends and family is a regular pastime. I long for living like one big connected family, or as Rachel, our Ugandan friend from London, puts it when talking about her family,
I love the fact that I have a very big extent. It's like a proper classical African traditional family. It's huge, it's wide, it's so many cousins that half the time you don't remember. So it's just that you feel like there's a piece of you everywhere. So yeah.
That is it right there. That's the dream, a piece of me everywhere. What would the world be like if more of us felt like that all of the time? Sometimes it seems like there are these social normalities that distance us from one another. In our culture, we tend to be avoidant. We ghost each other. We don't acknowledge communications. Looking at each other in the eye is going out of style. We don't even talk to each other in close spaces. It seems upside down that we would regard each other in this way. Andrea is from the Caribbean, which may be the most laid-back, chill place in all the places I've traveled to in my life. There seems to be a more natural, powerful focus on staying connected in these regions. She shares her experience of liming or hanging out.
You know what liming is? Well, liming is what people go, let's hang out. This is what we call liming, right? Hanging out, chilling, gathering. So very typically, just people just pop in, there's always beers in the fridge. We're a music family, so my brother will have his guitar, we do some singing, I might do some poetry, we tell some jokes, or we might play cards, or what you call old talk, right? So we're a family that and food always, of course, and that's a very, food. We gather, as African people, we gather around food all the time, right? As a very big part of our culture. So food and music and that community, that support that we get from being together as a community. And I suppose the other typical Trinidadian thing as well is the open house. Now, when I went to England to live, there was this, you can't just drop into people like that. You have to ring and make an appointment. You've got that. I'm like, what? So even when I was, even when I was in England, I maintained my Caribbeanness by ensuring that you don't have to ring. If you know we're home, just pop in. There'll always be food for you. You want to stay the night? Sure. That kind of stuff. That's kind of typically Trinidadian, very open door, open house, embracing culture around food and music and jokes and whatever else.
back to Rachel, who totally mirrors this
In
experience.
terms of my roots and what they made me, growing up in Uganda, we were raised by a village, and that's a term that always is thrown around if you've grown up in Africa in certain bits. Well, for me, I was generally raised by the village. I was raised by not only just my mum or my guardians, and also the people around us. So it was just so communal, and that taught me things like empathy, things like sharing, communication, working not just for your individualism. And I don't mean like actual career working, but when you do things, do them with other people, like always involve other people. I was very lucky enough to grow up in what you would call a wealthy family. But even with that, it was always teaching us things like pride, making sure that you communicate with other people, making sure that you also view people as actual, not this segregation of you're richer than this person or what. And that came from community, really and truly, as well as obviously my parents, but community really emphasized it because, unlike now living in the UK, you have to be hands-on, or like, because you have work and all of that, you can't get, like, for example, a house help or someone. So you're raised by your parents. In Uganda, it was so easy for the community to raise you so that the parents would go away. So even that impacted a lot on who I am. People tend to say I'm a bubbly person. I'm always smiling. I'm always looking out for community. That's how actually we met together. And I think these are things that inherently, indirectly, I learned from the way I was raised, especially those first few years of my life. And then by the time I went to secondary school, I did a bit of boarding school. Again, boarding school in Uganda teaches you, again, community, making sure that you all look the same. There's no segregation. So for me, those are things I would say deep down within me, I am always striving for community, which I find is sometimes lacking in the developed world. Like, I struggled the first 5 years I moved to London. I was just so confused with how things worked, how everyone is individualistic outside of just my individual family. It was so rare. Even now, I found myself like small examples, like I used to greet the neighbors. When I go home, for example, in Uganda, the first thing I do, I go to the neighbors, I say, hello, good morning. I'm always chit-chatting. In the UK, I find myself, I rarely go to my neighbors. And we have a good relationship with my next door neighbor, but I think I've acclimatized to, you don't just greet anyone, you don't just familiarize yourself with it. But in Uganda, sorry, you could be like, I don't know, 5 miles away and I would still know who you are. I'd still be able to respect you. I would still be able to feel like at home with you, obviously within boundaries. So yeah, so those are again, I think I'm like, it's a mixture of trying to see where do I sit. And that's why sometimes I'm like, I'm so lucky that I had that long period of time growing up in Uganda so that my adult years can be conformed in making the right decisions of who do I now want to be as an adult. Yeah.
It's clear that there are benefits from this more communal way of being together that are far beyond just the fun. Listening to Rachel and Andrea talk about being in Uganda and Trinidad reminds me of my own travels in West Africa, the Caribbean, and even New Orleans, which is totally a Caribbean city. Generally, everywhere I went, I was greeted and acknowledged. People seemed to know who their neighbors were and involved in taking care of each other in some way. And there seemed to be this awareness of familial relationship connections and continuously reminding me as a visitor and to each other that we are all family. That happened all the time. Che Kamala brings this perspective everywhere he goes. He finally talks about traveling and finding his mother and father and his whole family, no matter where he is.
Big family. When I came here, I have a lot of children. And I have a lot of brother. Even I can say father, mother. Like I say, if you are good, you travel, you find your father, you find your mother. Now I'm here like I'm in Mali. I have many the community.
The way he talks about this is a sentiment I hear a lot, especially from people in West Africa. It changed my perspective about who I really am and the community that I'm connected to all over the world. And I hope that getting a taste of your family, sharing with you through this storybook inspires you to remember this and maybe go travel to where your people are. Judy from Kenya exemplifies this so powerfully. She's someone who has grown up within what sounds like a familial community within her tribe. And this experience is a huge contributing factor to her clearly knowing who she is and who her people are. Judy is aligned with her life purpose with the drive to create it. The people of her tribe are called the Kambas.
I am a Kenyan. I come from a county called Kitui. My tribe is Kamba, and we as Kambas, I think most thing that we Kambas we like education. Most of Kamba people, as in they like education. You can't find that most Kambas you can't find more questions like Kambas drop out of school. No, we don't have such kinds of cases. Like we Kambas, we like education, and there are no more cases of dropouts in Ukambani. Yes. We are more focused as our tribe now. That's the things that makes me to be proud being a Kamba. We as Kambas, we are hardworking, both ladies and gentlemen. We usually work hard and we usually aim on succeeding in our lives. As in, if we are performing some things, we usually do them perfectly to ensure that we win. We usually aim to succeed. That's why I'm proud of being a Kamba.
And I want to acknowledge that these experiences of knowing who you are and where you come from are present in many ways here in the States. The people of the diaspora, or Black people, as some of us call ourselves, many of us do think of each other as family, from New York to Los Angeles. It's definitely expressed. And my hopes are that we start to extend this perspective out into all the places we do exist, especially all the way back to Africa. I spoke to Yvette about family and community, and she affirms that our connectedness is very much alive despite the destruction of colonialism.
I can say all over West Africa, we have mostly we are from Nubian, So through the journey our great parents made, there is in Nigeria, you find Ewe people like the Ghan people too. Especially from Ile Ife, you find our tribe there. So through the journey, we can say Nigerians, Ghanaians, Beninese, and Togolese, they have a special connection because everyone has sisters and brothers somewhere in those 4 countries. Ivory Coast, not forget Ivory Coast. In 5 countries, we can say we have our tribe over there. We can say we have our sisters and brothers over there. So if you are doing spiritual journey, it can bring you back to Nigeria. It can bring you back to Ivory Coast. It can bring you back to Benin. And that is where I made my journey, and I've seen that we have sisters and brothers in those 4 countries. And it is not easy because Africa have a lot of culture and a lot of tradition, which is not even discovered until now. So my roots is very complicated to explain. But the borders was made from colonialism. and that separates brothers and sisters from each other.
Though the focus of this storybook is on Africa and her diaspora, I think it's important to remember that, especially for us here in the States, sometimes we can find a deep connection in communities around us who have similar histories, like the indigenous people of this land. We have a shared experience in the devastation of our communities and families due to colonialism that formed who we are and how we exist today. And I'm grateful that Mike brings these ideas to our consciousness.
There's a broader question about being the descendants of forcibly displaced and enslaved Africans on land that was inhabited and is still inhabited by First Nations, indigenous people from different ethnic groups across this continent that people call American Indians or Native Americans, and being in relationship with people from different Native backgrounds and communities wherever I've lived. Actually, I didn't really have a lot of Native friends in Chicago, but by the time I was in Minnesota, I started to have friends who were Native, and then having to be aware of the common history that we have that was part of this colonial construct that was imposed on our people historically. One for the Africans who were stolen and displaced, and then for the Native people here who are still surviving genocide and who were displaced as part of that process. And so being aware that there's this like thing that ties us together is something that is just part of my consciousness, and then to move out here and to be in community and have strong Native brothers and sisters is part of my community, part of my friendships and chosen family, has just been something that has been a quiet part of how I get down and relate socially, but it's become more politicized lately in public discourse.
Let's talk to Sheikh Kamala from Mali, who's part of many communities across the world and has a really unique position. It seems like his very life is lived in service and in dedication to community on a very human level and a spiritual level as a griot. As we said in part 2 of the storybook, a griot is a storyteller, a person who shares guidance and wisdom. Griots can draw on ancient histories and are the keepers of oral traditions and advisors to people in all parts of society. Here's a little bit about griots in Sheikh's own words.
When you say the griot in Africa, griot have a lot of experience. People respect the griot. People know the griot is not somebody to joke. If you joke to the griot, I don't want to say all that, but it's very spiritual from my ancestor. If they told you, everyone respect the griot and to be careful to the griot. The griot is not for joke and a lot of experience. If you say traditional, either I don't know, but the griot is very special. People respect the griot. If not, you're gonna regret. It's not for today.
When were the first griots? You said so many hundreds of years back. When did all of that start?
I mean, it's a long story. My family is 800 years from I don't know how to tell you, but every moment have a different. Now, how things change. Before it was a very traditional and also spiritual. I don't think it changed. The people, the world every day is a several morning. It's not like before. Like me, the griot come to America. No, it's not easy. But we keep going the traditional, and we wish to continue because a lot of things change. The new generation, They change it. But we needed to promote more to don't forget this culture. Very important.
And there's so much more about griots that we do not cover in this storybook. And when I chatted with Jay Kamala about all the subjects, it always came back to him being a griot. It helped me understand that being a griot for him is far more than something he just does or learned or an identity. It's an embodiment. It's a way of being passed on and cultivated within families for centuries. And it's a position whose purpose is to serve the community. And sometimes they're community organizers. He told me about even helping people organize things like raising money for school.
The griot, who, like I told you, that are our society. Like you said, if somebody check be organized, because the people trust them and people respect them, people listen to them, we can organize some gathering, how to find the money to help those people. Either they want to do something for fundraising, anything, the griot can help.
So griots organize and they storytell and they help people with what they're trying to create in their life. And they also give guidance and help counsel. And that can go for someone who's about to get married all the way to the president.
I would say I'm in the griot family from 800 years, but we keep from generation to generation from the griots. Like if somebody married in Africa, you don't go looking for your wife, you pass from the griot to go to the other different family to talk and make the marriage ready. The day you get married, the griot come to speak about life and to be careful for the marriage. Because the griot gonna tell you the marriage is not like the clothes to wearing today white, to black, either yellow, either red, either... No, the marriage is only one color. Don't be married and divorced like that. You gotta take time. That's what they're supposed to see the griot. And if you have time, I explain one by one. The griot said, the day you married, the griot tell you to be blind, to be deaf, to don't listen people.
So if you missed that, what he's talking about is once you get married, you are one. And when you're in that marriage, you need to be blind and deaf to the distraction of others in your marriage. I think every community needs a griot. I can say that the best communities that I have been a part of have been ones where the generations connect and learn from one another. One of the saddest characteristics of the society that I live in now is that the elders are forgotten and not taken care of, and the youngsters are lost and disassociated and at war within their own bodies. And with that comes unspeakable abuses that sometimes perpetuate through all the generations. And, you know, this is a disconnected circumstance that we're in the States right now. And it's no wonder that we forget and maybe even sometimes reject who we are. Elaine, our Afro-Filipino friend living in London, has considered this in great detail.
We're trying to build communities again here. I think we're, accepting the role of being an elder now means it's incumbent upon us to talk to the youngers and also to set the example. But I think that also raises a lot of questions that are quite traumatic in the sense of there are two clear progressive paths that I've seen with people who've made money through business means and they've moved up and out. And there are people who stayed and they've tried to heal their communities and their payment is service and respect. But I look at kids and they don't think they look up to the people who help because they don't want to become them. I think it's nice to be helped, but I don't think young people, when they look at, the Drakes and the Rick Rosses and all the people who are making the money that they aspire to make, and they look at the person who's trying to stop gang violence or trying to bring people together and pass on knowledge, and they don't see them as winning. They're not, successful. And I suppose my challenge for community is, I look at like Eric B and Rakim. Rakim wore the gold and he had jewels for the mind, and I'm like, we have to reimagine the win-win. I'm not against entrepreneurialism. I think it's attractive and I think it's necessary, but I don't think it's that versus knowledge of self. And, trying to get back home to that mindset helps to create community, because otherwise it's quite tiered. I think you've got young teens who that's their little crew, and middle teens, that's how they behave, and people in their 20s behave like that. And we're missing that intergenerational thing that I think is genuine community. Somebody said when I was listening to a podcast or a book, audio book, the important link between the grandchildren and the grandparents is one have just come from the ancestors and the other are just about to go. And it's that connection to that higher value that makes it so important. And the grandparents leave a mark on those children as far as like an aspiration and a value and wisdom. And those grandparents derive joy and a connection to that spirit that comes from being innocent or having innocence. So I kind of crave all of that. I crave that need for community and families really communicating. And because we're caught in this thing, whether you live in Brooklyn and you can't afford to live there anymore, or you live in London, in North London, and you can't afford to live here, it's forced migration that breaks up families. And I'm missing that. That's my own personal story. I know lots of people who live in neighborhoods and they're really happy with their communities. I've got my own community, a creative community. We're scattered all over the place. We love spoken word. We love hip hop. We love good food, great conversation. Like that's my tribe as well. So I identify with that. And then, whenever I want to disappear into Filipino world, it's a barbecue away. You're just there and it's exactly as you left it.
The intention of the storybook is simply to help us remember who we are and that we have family all over the world. And I'm going to add one of the most empowering experiences I had in realizing this for myself and embodying who I am had to do with my journeys that took me to West Africa. And I hope that in listening to this, no matter how you identify yourself, that you're encouraged to go and travel and find your family around the world. I wanted to include this one last clip from a conversation I was having with Alain. We were talking originally about, Africans that left the continent and traveled around the world and sort of uncovering these mysteries and these, hidden histories of our people. And it ends with him going on a journey, following his roots back and going on a journey to find his Uncle Bertie. I thought the story was so inspiring and I wanted to include it in this part of the storybook. So enjoy and thank you for listening.
It's interesting. We're so overall obsessed with the idea of understanding something, to say, this is my understanding. I'm holding on to this identity. The great thing about travel is it dislocates you. You can feel at home in a place you've never been. You can meet someone in a country and feel more akin to them than your neighbor just by the vibe they have. It makes you start to reframe the idea of being a citizen of the world. And it makes us think about why Africans left Africa and created homes around the world. What made them want to stay and what did they share? I mean, learning about Stonehenge, how Africans built Stonehenge, and how it aligns with the pyramids, and how the mathematics of that comes from our people I can go Stonehenge. That's a few hours drive, but no one will tell me that be black. You know, there are some white witches and druids and stuff, but where did they get the mysticism and knowledge from? They got it from us. We came and we brought things. We brought knowledge. We brought goods. We brought irrigation. It's all these things. So we are here. Wherever we are, we've been here many, many times, or we can call the places we're at home as well. Ivan van Sertima and John Hendrik Clark, you know, some of the great historians who've passed away and with the ancestors will tell us that we were in America before slavery. You know, it's really complex ideas that some blacks were admittedly transported from West Africa into Caribbean, into America, but we also had a population that were already here. We have been everywhere. We are from the beginning. So it's reframing things where it isn't so much I am going on these journeys. We're on a land that has been our land forever. We never really claimed lands. I don't think that was the shout for us, and it wasn't for the native, you know, Indians. The land claimed them. You know, they were giving themselves to the land. They paid service to the land. So concepts of occupancy and the concepts of ownership and these borders are things which they frame our thinking. But that dislocation, I love it. It's so humbling when you go somewhere and somebody says, you look like your great, great, great granddad, or you act like this ancestor. You have a bit of this in you, that eternal spirit humbles you because you're working with something ancient. And then I remember being in St. Vincent, this craziest story. I was in St. Lucia and I was with my partner at the time. We were kind of very young to our relationship and we were just on holiday. And I told her, oh, my family's from the next island. She goes, and you're not going to go? I was like, yeah, I should. And I don't know who's still there. Like everyone I know has gone to England and a couple went to America. I don't know who's there apart from a guy called Uncle Bertie. That's all I know. His name is Uncle Bertie. You know the ones, so you just know Aunt Cicely or whatever. He's just called Uncle Bertie. I met him once because he came to the UK and he was like, love him to death, but he was completely bush. Like he was just like, he didn't know nothing about city life. Met him 1 or 2 times. So I thought, well, let me go. So I said to my partner, I'm going to go for a day trip. You go and do you. I'm going to go and see if Uncle Bertie is about. Find him and say hello. I'm coming back. So I flew over, got to customs. They're asking me, you know, who are you? Like, I'm from here originally. Why are you here? Come to see my Uncle Bertie. Like, how long are you staying for? I'm leaving today. They're thinking this is the most like brazen drug mule we've ever met. Like this guy, how is he coming for like less than a day to a country? Who does that? But they let me in. And then I knew Chateau Bel Air is the village where my dad's from. So I kept my mouth shut because I looked like everybody. And I waited for the bus and I boarded the bus. I got close to Chateau Bel Air and I thought, let me roll the dice and take a chance. So I shouted out on the bus, does anybody know where Uncle Bertie lives? And the bus driver goes, oh, yeah, Uncle Bertie. Yeah, last stop. I'll show you where he lives. I'm thinking, rah, that was crazy easy. Multi loves me. This is blessed. Right, so we get to last stop. Right as rain, he gets out of the bus, takes me to the house and says, this is where Uncle Bertie lives. And I wave him goodbye and I knock on the door. His family come out and look at me. I tell them my story and they look a bit bewildered and a bit vexed as well. Turns out Uncle Bertie passed away. And he lived in a little shack, little rundown, and nobody sent money from back home to bury him. So now I'm carrying this pressure of being the representative of who has left and made something of themselves. So I was like, let me see what I can do. I'll give some money, I'll go out for some food, tell me the stories. They took me through the village and paraded me through the town and waved at everybody. And they pointed at me, said, he's come from London. And I'm just waving at people, nodding, great, cool. Got to the beach and then I took them out for some food. So we sat down, eating the food, and then this white Suzuki Vitara Jeep pulls up. And this woman in white, I swear, she glided out of the Jeep. She came over and she said, you have family in the UK. You have an uncle who lives in America. you are mine. And I looked at the people and they looked at me and they let me go. And I left with this woman. And I said to her, how did you know I was here? Because while that family were parading you around town, somebody looked in your face and came to find me and said, one of yours has returned home. And that's what I mean. Like, whatever I think I am, I'm something else. That's the opposite of projection. That's somebody actually looking at my features, not just knowing I am Vincentian, but knowing which line of Vincentian and being so certain to call a woman and say, we don't know how, but he's here. And that really made me feel spiritually connected and humble, and made me rethink a bit about identity as well. Yeah, it's one of those crazy stories. And I learned so much about my family through her when I came back, and made me understand a lot more about the life I was living in London, what happened to my dad and my grandmother. So yeah, you know, just when you think you know, you get another message about what life is about.
Afro Storybook, collective wisdom and revelations from Africa and her diaspora. I'm your host, producer, and editor, Alexandra Loves, Irowiosa. You can find me at themoongardentemple.com or on IG at Tranquil Badassery. This is a production of the Moon Garden Temple and the Woke Wisdom Podcast. Please go to www.wokewisdompodcast.com or on IG, Woke Wisdom Podcast, to learn more about the storybook and my guests. My guests are Elaine Fusion Clapham, Judy Kalunga Kwavoile, Mike Crenshaw, Belin Ramirez, Jibori Abla Yvette, Chekamala Diabate, Rachel Bashave, Andrea Sugar Black Encinas, and Olutosin Oladoshu Adebwale. Special thanks to the Portland Regional Arts Council for the initial funding of this project. And also special thanks to Seven Vision Studios for technical help and Quincy Davis for sharing his original compositions for the theme music and soundscaping for this storybook. Please consider supporting this project and future audio projects by subscribing to Woke Wisdom Podcast on Patreon. Thank you for listening and be blessed.